John and Ken Show, John Cobelt and Ken Shampoo, KFI AM 640.
All right, well, the Moist Line comes your way in just a few days. Already back to that. Call us, 1-818-5-MOIST-9. That's 1-818-566-4789.
If you want an exact number, an exact percentage of how many people in the United States cannot do math, just look at Bernie Sanders' vote totals. Look at his polling. And those are the people who are incapable of adding and subtracting.
And again, the media is obsessed with the fact that Bernie Sanders is scoring the youth vote. Because they don't ordinarily vote. It's good to see they're engaged.
They don't do
But
math.
these are largely people, and a lot of them do have student loan debt. I understand that. But they don't understand the realities of the world and how the U.S. economy works. And how, if Bernie Sanders got his way, good Lord, what your tax bill might look like. We have what is described as a nonpartisan think tank, the Urban Brookings Tax Policy Center and the Urban Institute Health Policy Center. They're well known in Washington circles, and they're considered nonpartisan. They put out a joint analysis as to actually how much it's going to cost if Bernie Sanders' tax and spending proposals did become the way of life here in the U.S., and it would cause an $18 trillion hole in the federal deficit.
It would double over the next 10 years. We're at $19 trillion. It would add another $18 trillion.
It would pile on so much debt, it would damage the economy.
And it would raise tax. This is with raising taxes by $15 trillion.
Because that's not going to be enough.
So imagine.
Plus, raising taxes does hurt the economy, too. It's money people don't have to spend on stuff that keeps the economy rolling.
Imagine that they raise taxes by $15 trillion and the debt still goes up another $18 trillion. That's, but most people don't understand what a trillion is.
Here's the rundown. He wants a government-run health care system, right? He does not, because Obamacare is not that. He wants to go all the way like they do in some countries around the world.
100% coverage for everything.
Right. Free undergraduate college. Enhanced Social Security, family, and medical leave benefits. The cost of the health care plan alone is more than $30 trillion, according to the study.
And so it's unworkable, and you would never get Congress. You would never get congressmen from either party to go along with this.
Probably not.
This is just primarily an emotional campaign because people are so angry and frustrated. And I understand that. The Trump campaign's an emotional campaign.
Yeah,
a lot of his policies don't really add up but are contradictory too. But this is the way people vent. These are the messengers that they're using to vent their frustration and anger with the way both parties have effed up the country.
The Sanders health care plan would cost about $32 trillion over 10 years. And the Sanders campaign came back with, but it significantly underestimates what will be health care savings through less bureaucracy, simplified paperwork, lower prescription drug prices. However, the response by one of the researchers is that the countries they're talking about, and the Sanders campaign said if every other major country can spend less on health care and insure all of their people, so can the U.S. Their systems have been in place for decades, meaning that if we were to commit to this, maybe we'd be in that situation decades from now. But for now, it's going to cost a lot to roll out this program. And again, mostly we're talking about health care for all.
All right, the thing is, why would we trust the people who currently work in government to execute it? Look at, you know what a good test run is for health care? The Veterans Administration. Look how horrible their medical program is.
And those are the people you should work the hardest to take care of.
Yeah, but I mean...
Think about your average riffraff person that didn't serve in the military under a government health care run system.
I want to see it actually work in some limited way before I would trust it. How could you trust it when the veterans have to wait months and months just to make an initial appointment? How could you trust it? That's a government health care program. It doesn't work. Why would you trust a program for 330 million people to work? Where's the evidence that it would work? I don't have time for people's theories and their wish lists and their emotional desires for a perfect world. You look at reality. If you could show me, that you don't have veterans dying before they get to their first appointment, I'll listen to you for 5 minutes. But right now, you have the cruelest disaster imaginable. It's just awful. So I want to tell these people with their government health care programs, stick it. It doesn't work. Why instead of bothering me, why don't you go work for the VA? Figure out what's wrong there. When you get that fixed, then come back. We'll give you a hearing.
This study points out what we've mentioned on the show many times before. The problem with Bernie Sanders and his tax policies, there's not enough wealthy people. What they did was they tried to figure out, based on income brackets, who would benefit and who would pay under a Bernie Sanders government. And yes, the top 5% would end up paying about $110,000, which would amount to a 17% decline in their incomes. However, Sanders has proposed so many tax hikes on the wealthy, he would have to start looking at taxpayers further down the ladder for additional money to make his budget plans work. And that could change the entire distribution of winners and losers. So what's proposed now, because as I said, it's going to run up big deficits. Somebody has to look at that and say, well, it's not enough. We don't have enough money to cover Bernie's socialist plans. We're going to have to reach out and tax more people, and that's what they'll do.
You know what? I don't trust people who never worked for a living. He never worked for a living. He really didn't. He never had a real job.
Yeah, he bummed around.
He was a bum for 40 years.
He studied a trade or something. I forget what it was.
He was a bad carpenter. For a brief period of time.
Right.
He was never successful at any job ever. And he lived in a wooden cabin, and his first wife left him because he was so poor. And obviously it's not because he didn't have, enough intelligence or enough energy. He wasn't sickly. He was just crazy. He didn't want to work. So he found a profession where you don't have to work. You could be a politician. Just stand and talk all day.
He's proposed more than 24 tax increases, mostly on the wealthy. But it says here the government would have to increase borrowing to cover the gap between the cost of his spending plans and the revenue his tax hikes would bring in. That could create a drag on the economy.
He's just an old hippie. Really. He's like from he's out of a museum. You open up the hippie closet. Here's what humans looked like in the 1960s in America. Okay? That's all you got.
Yeah, they said he's been ranting about socialism since he was in his 20s.
I know. Yeah, I know. And the thing is, a lot of the people from the 60s, what they did is they grew up by the 1980s. If you remember, they were considered the yuppies, right? Yuppie for young urban professional. They all went to Wall Street. They created the Green Decade and blah, 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 blah. All right? So that they grew up. This is the kind of philosophy you have when you're 20 years old in college, right? And you're smoking a lot of pot, and you're not bathing, and you're just laying around in the mud. But when you're 74 years old and you're still trying to sell this garbage, and that's what it is. It's garbage.
All right,
shouldn't even be discussed out loud anymore. It's been so discredited.
Is Lion Ted Cruz coming back? We'll tell you what he said today. By the way, I watched this, John, on CNN.